Hi, it's Amy. If you're looking to apply to an MBA program or just considering whatever part of the process you're in, well, this video is going to be helpful to you. Okay, before I dive in, make sure to like and subscribe for more helpful tips. So I got into both MIT Sloan and Columbia Business School. I applied through the deferred MBA program, but what I'm going to go through in this video is applicable to even regular applicants. We all know that admissions has gotten really competitive, especially over the last few years. And so really getting a head start by doing these things as quickly, as early as possible will give you a big leg up. So let's just jump right into it. First thing I have is to find your why. So you've done a lot of things, cool things, no doubt, throughout your years of school or work, but you have to know like what that all means and how that relates to your goal of getting an MBA. The MBA application really wants to understand your motivation, drive, and just to know your story. So you have to know your story first, and this part takes a long time, especially when you're thinking of what to write about and even when you're considering your MBA. So that's why it's good to start this as soon as possible. You want to understand who you are and not just what you've done. In line with knowing your why is looking at your resume, and for each point, like it may be really impressive, right? But you want to think about why you did each of those things. So if you volunteered at the hospital, why a hospital specifically? And if you led a certain leadership initiative or took a certain position, what was your motivation behind that? You want to have an idea of how to present each as a piece of what drives you, and they all come together to be why you're choosing to do an MBA and why you're considering this as a next step and how this will help you in the future to help society or achieve whatever other goals you have. And this is compelling to admissions as well, because then they get to know you better, because the better you know yourself, the better you can present it all on paper, since it's very limited space as just a 2D portrayal of each profile, each person. Knowing your why is also a great first step, because then you have a better idea of which MBA programs to look into and which ones to pursue and go head on to, so you have a much more targeted approach. This is useful also for those who are considering an MBA and for deferred MBA applicants as well, because like knowing who you are in the beginning and why MBA is even a consideration in this process, you might realize like, oh, all the things I'm doing don't really line up to really need an MBA, or like an MBA isn't really in line with the rest of my story. So yeah, make sure to do that first. Second thing I have is to conduct research. So once you have an idea of your story and potentially then like what area or division you want to do. So for example, I interned at a biotech company and I'm still really passionate about it, but I realized I wanted to be more involved in the leadership aspect of things. And so when I was looking into MBA programs, I made sure that they had healthcare clubs and opportunities that way through their career support and networking events. When you're conducting research, by having done the first step, then you can see like, oh, this program has a certain club that really lines up well, and then make sure to like note these things down, because in the beginning, gaining that awareness will just make it easier when you're writing your application at the end. Well, not at the end, that's like the middle of the process, but you know, like that step of the process will be a lot easier. Conducting research means signing up for newsletters and getting on those mailing lists, because then you don't have to really do much of the work of knowing when events are, because you'll just get notified, and then this is a rolling thing that you can participate in. So that's why you should just do that as soon as possible. In line with being notified of these, you can search these webinars and other virtual events up yourself and really just gain information and learn from the students who are speaking at those events, because they'll speak from their own experience and you'll get a more personal, a more humanized view of what your experience might look like and how the culture might suit you. And overall, when they're talking about their goals, then you might be inspired to change your direction or to refine your goal more. And it's just a great way to really have a better idea of why you want an MBA. I stress the point about knowing why you want an MBA so much, because that's a lot of the times what admissions will ask you, and that's what they want your application to portray, even if they're not asking it directly. There are also virtual lectures. So I attended one by Columbia Business School professor, and it got me really excited about how they're still learning about technology and how to manage that, because, you know, I'm from Caltech, so I got really excited about that combination. And you can learn about topics and kind of see what the classes would look like if you do attend. There are also tons of resources, free resources online that you can help inform your research. So MBA Mission each has a guide on all the top MBA programs, and it's super comprehensive for every step of the way. So I'd recommend any school you're interested in, just download it and even skim it or read the intro. Just gaining that awareness and knowing what you're getting into and how much work you have to put into formulating your story, getting the right test scores and your stats up to par. It's really helpful. And there are also forums like Poets and Quants, and you'll hear about that. And personally, I don't use Reddit, but I heard that that's helpful as well because there are discussions on there. Either way, like a Google search into the schools and other specific questions you have. Everyone uses Google these days. I'm sure you're a master, so yeah, use the internet to your advantage. And then lastly, another advantage of the digital age now is people's receptiveness to virtually meet. And so you can reach out to alumni on LinkedIn, especially if they have mutual connections, if they worked at the same company you did, and if you're still in school, if they're an alumni of your school. And so that's been really helpful as well, since I mean, you get to choose what questions they answer and you get targeted, a more targeted approach to understanding the culture and the things that might not be as well known on the internet. Okay, later, after the conducting research, is to gather your strengths and weaknesses. Everyone has faults, like no profile is perfect, and even the seemingly most perfect candidate may get rejected because that's just the nature of admissions. You don't know what's behind there and what kind of quota or thing they want to fill. But basically, by knowing your weaknesses, for example, like if you have a relatively weak GPA, then you know that the GMAT is an opportunity, or GRE for that matter, it's an opportunity for you to still show your academic and intellectual ability and horsepower. That was a lot of jargon, but you know what I mean. You can also think about if you have a weakness in leadership roles in clubs, and by missing that piece of a formal role, you can think of the other ways which you've led. And therefore, by doing this early, you can have enough time to sometimes like randomly think, oh, I'm doing this shows leadership, or think back to a time in a club, not formally in a role, but you encourage some efforts. And an example of this for me is like my freshman year, I brought together my group of chemie classes and then basically created this study group with a calendar and scheduled study time, such that then we were super on top of it and we were a really tight, close-knit group who was really on top of their work for the next 4 years. And from what I could see, no other class, major as in like Mechie's, other E's or CS, granted they're like larger groups, but I didn't see that structure as much. And so that's a sign of leadership, but it's not like I had a role of like, oh, chemie team leader, right? Admissions wants MBA candidates who are good quantitatively and with more verbal skills. And so yeah, it's a great chance to see what kinds of ways that you can be more vocal and show those verbal skills or leadership positions that you've taken too. I went on the weaknesses first, but let's end on a good note. So you have many strengths as well, and everyone is unique in that maybe one strength isn't unique specifically, but the way you do it or your combination of strengths may be special. And so you might not realize it on a daily basis when you're doing these things, but by having this awareness and kind of trying to think and gather what your strengths are early on, then when someone compliments something that you're doing in a certain way, you'll be like, oh, okay, like why does that make me different? How is that a strength? And kind of again, like write in your repertoire and kind of just like note it down, right? Don't rely on memory, and gather these strengths over time, both personality wise or like work ethics wise, or you've earned many awards and accomplished things in a specific area. These can be lost while you're doing them, even if you have a resume, right? But some things like in your family life are not so apparent, and people actually do use a lot of these family life examples in their essays to show leadership. So yeah, gather your strengths and weaknesses and just play up your strengths while seeing how you can maybe offset your weaknesses. Lastly, a good thing to do early is to find your advocators. So eventually these are going to be your recommenders. So just know like ahead of time who has seen not only your leadership actions, like what you've done, but also who can probably speak to how you consistently show leadership character, but also who can probably say that you've consistently demonstrated leadership ability and strong values. And so it's nice that they understand your motivations. These people might be like your mentors if you worked in a research lab, or supervisor, or maybe a colleague. But it's good to have these in mind. And if you don't have anyone in mind and you feel like they've seen your actions, but they don't really know you on that deep level and can speak to your why, which you need to show right through your letters and recommendations as well, then you can just set up a coffee chat. Ask them to speak about career and chat and any advice they have. And then through that process and that proactiveness, we'll kind of already see like, oh, you're pretty ambitious, or like you have a certain drive and maybe like you want to help people, and then they can see like, oh, you're good at this more than I thought just from the classroom or in the office. And so by chatting more just in that coffee chat, then it's an easy way for them to be set up to be your recommender in the future. This would be separate from when you actually ask them to write your letters of recommendation, because you'll probably have to set up a more directed, targeted meeting to walk them through the process and what the MBA program is looking for. Okay, so that was a lot, but I hope these all make sense to why they're important. I'll answer all the questions left on this video. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.